A murder victim whose identity remained unknown for 46 years has finally been identified. She had been stabbed repeatedly and was pregnant.
We're here to share the news. It's been more than 45 years in the making. Today, thanks to our cold case unit, we finally have put a name to a young woman who for decades was known only as Jane Doe.
The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
On a summer afternoon in 1980, families were gathered at Westlake High School in California, cheering on a youth sporting event below the football field. Children were laughing, parents were watching, and just a short distance away, on a dirt slope above the parking lot, the body of a young woman lay hidden from view. She had been strangled, stabbed 16 times, and left there without a purse, without identification, and without a name. For 46 years, she was known only as Jane Doe. But this case did not end when her killer was caught. Because even after a conviction, even after life in prison, even after decades of investigation, nobody still knew who she was, until now. And what finally brought her identity to light was not luck. It was science, patience, and a 7-year search through a family tree containing more than 125,000 names. Her name was Marisella Rocha Para, and this is the story of how she was found. Welcome to the Black Docket, where the cases are cold, but the truth never stays buried forever. If you love deep dive true crime documentaries built on facts, mystery, and the fight to give victims their names back, subscribe now and stay with us to the end, because this one gets more devastating the deeper you go. It was Friday, July 18th, 1980. When a maintenance worker made a discovery that would haunt Ventura County for decades. He was walking his usual route across the grounds of Westlake High School in Westlake Village when he came upon a body on a remote dirt slope near the upper parking lot. The location itself raised immediate questions. This was not a place where someone would casually stumble across a victim. Below the slope, a youth sports event was underway, with families gathered only a short distance away. Life was happening loudly and normally beneath them, while just out of sight, something brutal had already taken place. When deputies arrived, they quickly realized the woman had not been killed where she was found. Drag marks cut through the dirt. Blood trailed down the slope. The scene suggested the body had been dumped there, not attacked in that exact spot. She was lying on her back, still wearing a white short-sleeved top and red corduroy pants. Her black high-heeled sandals had been kicked off and left nearby in the brush, as if they were discarded during the violence or after it was over. There was no purse, no wallet, no identification, no key to her life, and no immediate way to tell the world who she was. Investigators also found tire tracks in the soil, which supported the idea that she had been brought there by vehicle. But there were no footprints indicating a suspect had carried her across the ground. Someone had likely driven up, disposed of the body, and disappeared before anyone realized what had happened. For a moment, a motorcycle found nearby looked like a possible break, but that turned out to be a false lead, a coincidence with no connection to the murder. What remained was a young woman, brutally killed, completely unclaimed by the world. At the Ventura County Medical Examiner's office, the full picture became clearer and darker. She had fought back. Her arms and hands showed injuries consistent with a desperate struggle. There were cuts, bruises, abrasions, and defensive wounds that told investigators she had tried to protect herself as the attack unfolded. Her fingernails were still intact, and beneath them, examiners collected biological material that would become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. The autopsy showed that she had been manually strangled until she lost consciousness. That was not the final cause of death, but it was part of the violence that subdued her before the stabbing began. She had been stabbed 16 times. The wounds were severe, concentrated in the chest and abdomen, and they left no doubt that this was homicide. It was not a quick act. It was intimate, cruel, and deliberate. Then came the detail that changed everything. She was pregnant. Medical examination showed she was carrying a male fetus, estimated to be 4 to 5 months along. That meant the victim was not only a daughter, sister, or friend to someone somewhere, She was also a mother in the middle of building another life. There were additional clues that painted a fuller picture of who she had been. Her toxicology was clean. No drugs, no alcohol. Her teeth suggested access to strong dental care. She was not someone drifting without support. She had been living a life with structure, care, and purpose. But in 1980, none of that was enough to give her a name. The DNA beneath her fingernails was preserved, but the science to interpret it did not yet exist. The evidence sat in storage, while the investigation stalled around it. And in the meantime, another body had already been found. Just 4 days before this woman was discovered at Westlake High School, another young woman had been found in Kern County. She had also been strangled. She had also been stabbed. She also bore the marks of a violent struggle. At the time, nobody realized the two murders were connected. There was no shared database, no cross-county digital system, no easy way for investigators in neighboring jurisdictions to see the pattern that would later become obvious. So both women were left to sit in separate files, separated by county lines and bureaucracy, even though they were victims of the same predator. That predator would later be identified as Wilson Claude Schuss Jr., a man whose violence had already been exposed years before these murders happened. But in 1980, nobody had put the pieces together yet, and the woman on the hillside remained unidentified. Before she became a Jane Doe, Marisella Rocha Para was a young woman trying to build a future. She was born in Monterrey, Mexico, in 1958. As a child, she was part of an immigrant family that made the difficult decision to leave home and start over in the United States. They settled in Los Angeles, looking for opportunity and stability. Marisella was described by her family as determined, loving, and protective. She was the kind of older sister who held things together, the kind of person others could rely on. She had a 2-year-old daughter and was working hard to make sure that child had a better life. During the day, she waited tables in downtown Los Angeles. At night, she attended nursing school. That detail matters because it tells you who she was. She was not drifting. She was not disconnected. She was sacrificing, building, planning. She was trying to rise. But she also had one of the vulnerabilities that many young working women had in 1980. She did not own a car. Public transportation was unreliable, and getting home from night classes could mean hitchhiking or accepting rides from people she knew or from people she thought she could trust. That ordinary, everyday reality may have been what exposed her to danger. Her last known family contact came in June of 1980, when she visited her older sister Rosalinda Vega. Then came July. Marisella was supposed to show up for her younger sister Alma Yvonne Braden's 10th birthday party with the cake. She never arrived. For the family, that absence was not just sad. It was wrong in a way they could feel immediately. Alma, who was only 10 at the time, later said she knew in her gut that her sister was gone. The birthday that should have been a happy childhood memory became the moment a family entered a decades-long nightmare. Marisella had last been seen wearing a white top and red corduroy pants, the same clothing she was found in. When Marisella disappeared, her family did what families do when someone they love vanishes. They looked. Rosalinda searched the streets of Los Angeles herself. The family contacted hospitals, filed reports, and held on to hope as long as they could. But hope was working against a system that was never built to protect someone like Marisella effectively. She vanished in Los Angeles County. Her body was found in Ventura County. That split mattered. There was no automatic cross-check between counties. No unified missing persons database that would connect one family's desperate report to one county's unidentified murder victim. In a modern system, the overlap might have triggered a match. In 1980, it didn't. And then there was the bias. Investigators at the time speculated that the victim might have been a prostitute, even though there was no physical evidence to support that idea. That kind of assumption can change the temperature of a case instantly. It can make a victim feel less urgent to the system, less protected, less human. As if that were not enough, The original rape kit collected during the autopsy was later lost during years of evidence transfers and reorganizations. That should have been the end of the road. But one critical piece survived: the clothing she was wearing, along with the fingernail scrapings that had captured the attacker's DNA. That evidence sat untouched for decades, waiting for the technology to catch up. Wilson Claude Schuss Jr. was not a mystery to the women who survived him. He had a history. Born in New Orleans in 1951, he had once been an altar boy and reportedly even considered the priesthood before being expelled from Catholic school. By 1969, he already had a criminal record. In 1972, he was convicted of fraud and sent to prison. But his more dangerous pattern emerged in 1977. That year, he offered a ride to a 20-year-old woman near Topanga Canyon. Once she was inside his vehicle, she discovered that the passenger side door handles had been removed, making escape impossible. He threatened her with a knife, bound her hands, drove her to a secluded hillside, and assaulted her. He strangled and kicked her until she lost consciousness, then stole her belongings and left her behind. She survived. He was convicted of kidnapping and robbery and later paroled in June of 1980. 1 month later, Marisella disappeared. After his release, Schuss began corresponding with a woman named Carolyn Bell through a biker magazine pen pal ad. He moved into her home in Lower California. Then, while Carolyn was in an alcohol treatment facility in July 1980, he took her green Chrysler and disappeared overnight. When he came back, the car's rear footwell was covered in blood. He told Carolyn's sons he had hit a deer. But he told Carolyn's 13-year-old son Patrick something else entirely. He said he had met a woman in a bar and killed her. That is the kind of statement that should have set off alarms everywhere. Instead, it floated in the dark, disconnected from the bodies in Ventura and Kern County. He would go on to abduct 2 college students from the College of the Sequoias in Visalia in August and September of 1980. One of them was raped in a cornfield. Schuss was arrested in September, convicted that November, and sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. By then, the window for identifying Marisella had already closed. There were 3 major reasons this case remained unsolved for so long. First, the science was not ready. DNA profiling did not exist as an investigative tool in 1980. The evidence under Marisella's fingernails could not be tested the way it could years later. Second, the records were fragmented. Los Angeles County held her missing persons report. Ventura County held her homicide file. There was no system to merge those worlds. Third, and most painfully, the victim was treated through a lens of suspicion instead of urgency. That kind of institutional bias can slow a case, shrink attention, and leave a person buried in paperwork for decades. And then, over time, the physical rape kit disappeared. That left the case hanging by a thread, but that thread was enough. In 2011, the Ventura County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit revisited the evidence with modern forensic tools. Even without the original kit, scientists were able to extract usable male DNA from the fingernail scrapings and from fibers on Marisella's clothing. That was the turning point. In 2013, the DNA profile was entered into the National Offender Database. The match was immediate. Wilson Claude Schuss Jr. For the first time since 1980, the killer of the Westlake High School Jane Doe had a name attached to him. That DNA match also linked Marisella's murder to the woman found in Kern County, proving the 2 cases were part of the same violent pattern. But there was still a strange, brutal contradiction in the story. The killer had been identified, convicted, imprisoned, and the victim still had no name. That is what made this case so haunting. A murderer could be known, convicted, and sentenced, while the woman he killed remained anonymous in the public record. Justice had a body. Identity did not. In 2018, Ventura County partnered with the DNA Doe Project, a nonprofit that specializes in using investigative genetic genealogy to identify unknown remains. This is where the case entered its second act. Unlike traditional offender DNA databases, Genetic genealogy works by searching for relatives, not direct matches. It uses dense DNA analysis and comparison across huge sets of markers, then reconstructs family trees until one branch leads back to the right person. In Marisella's case, that process was anything but simple. Her ancestry traced back to Mexico, and people of Mexican and indigenous heritage are underrepresented in many commercial DNA databases. That meant the first wave of results did not produce close relatives. Instead, researchers were left with tiny, distant connections. So the work became manual, exhaustive, relentless. More than 40 volunteers helped build a family tree containing over 125,000 people. 7 years of research, 7 years of records, census documents, civil registrations, obituaries, and family connections. The tree eventually pointed to a couple born in the late 1800s in Zacatecas, Mexico, likely Marisella's great-grandparents. From there, researchers had to work forward through generations until they found a living relative. On December 9, 2025, investigators contacted a great-grandson of that family line. When they explained what they believed, he said something that changed everything. His sister had gone missing from Los Angeles in 1980. Her name was Marisella Rocha. The next day, 2 of Marisella's siblings flew to California to provide reference samples. In January 2026, the identification was officially confirmed. After 46 years, the woman on the hillside had her name back. The public announcement came on February 23, 2026, when Ventura County officials stood before the cameras and revealed what Marisella's family had waited nearly half a century to hear. Their sister had been found, or more accurately, she had been named. That distinction matters, because the family did not need a body to know she was gone. They had lived with that loss for decades. What they needed was certainty. They needed the truth. They needed the record to finally catch up to what their hearts had already known. For Rosalinda Vega, the search had never stopped. She had spent years looking at strangers' faces, hoping for a miracle. Their mother died, never learning what happened to her daughter. And Alma, the little sister whose birthday party Marisella missed, carried the weight of that absence into adulthood. The revelation brought relief, but it also brought grief in full detail. The family could finally mourn Marisella, not as a number. On National Crime Victims' Rights Week in April 2026, the family was recognized for their endurance and resilience. After all those years, they were no longer searching for a missing person. They were remembering a sister, a mother, a daughter. One of the most tragic details in this case is that Marisella was pregnant when she died. Investigators later isolated paternal DNA from the fetus, and it did not match Wilson Schust or any known offender in the national database. That means the pregnancy was not connected to the man who murdered her. She was building a family. She already had a 2-year-old daughter waiting for her and another child on the way. That makes the violence feel even more unbearable, because it was not only a murder, it was the destruction of a future that was already unfolding. This case also showed the power of preserving evidence that might seem secondary at the time. The lost rape kit could have ended everything, but the clothing and fingernail scrapings survived long enough to let science catch up. That is a lesson cold case investigators never forget. Preserve everything, because one day, something small may be the only thing that can speak for the dead. Marisella's case is a reminder that cold cases are not just about old crimes. They are about systems that failed people while they were alive and after they were dead. It shows how technology, when it finally arrives, can reopen stories that were nearly erased. It also exposes a major weakness in modern forensic work: underrepresentation in DNA databases. When families from Latin American or indigenous backgrounds are missing from those systems, identification takes longer and demands more manual labor from researchers and volunteers. That is exactly what happened here. This case was solved not because everything worked smoothly, but because enough people refused to stop. A cold case unit preserved the evidence. A nonprofit took the lead. Volunteers built the family tree. A distant cousin became a doorway, and a family that had spent 46 years in uncertainty finally got the truth. That is the power of persistence. And it is also the tragedy of how long the system took to get there. Marisella Rocha Para was 22 years old. She was a mother, a nursing student, a waitress, and a young woman trying to build a future in a new country. For 46 years, she was reduced to a file label. Now she has her name back. Her killer is behind bars for life. Her family finally knows what happened, and the woman who disappeared so completely that even her murder conviction could not restore her identity is no longer anonymous. She is Marisella Rocha Para. And for the Black Docket, that is what justice sounds like when it finally arrives too late, but not too late to matter. But this case is only half the story. Just 4 days before Marisella was found, another young woman was discovered in a Kern County orchard under nearly identical circumstances. She too went unnamed for years, and her identification helped reveal the full pattern of the man responsible. That story is next. So stay with the Black Docket, because if you thought this case was haunting, the one that helped crack it open is even more disturbing.